Topsy and Tim were going to the zoo. First, they made sure their pets had all they needed for their day at home. "Let's ask the zoo animals if they would like to come home with us," said Topsy. "Animals can't answer questions," said Tim. Topsy and Tim met the penguins first. They walked like funny old men, but they dived and swam beautifully. Topsy and Tim would have liked the penguins to come home with them, but they looked so happy in the zoo. The parrots in the aviary were making a dreadful noise. Topsy had heard that parrots could answer questions, so she asked one, "Would you like to come home with us?" "Ripe bananas, brown bread," squawked the parrot. "I'm afraid parrots don't give sensible answers," said Dad. They went to see the friendly elephant. "He's the highest in the whole zoo," said Tim. Then they saw a giraffe. She was higher still with her long neck. She bent her head all the way down to see Topsy and Tim. "Hello up there," said Tim. "Look," said Tim, "horses in football jerseys." The zebras showed how they could kick. One kicked another with his back hooves. "We don't want those zebras at home," said Dad. "They might kick us." "Look, white teddy bears," said Topsy. "Those are polar bears," said Mummy, "and they are very fierce." "We won't take them home," said Tim. A crowd of people hurried past Topsy and Tim. "They are going to watch the lions being fed," said Mummy. "Let's go too," shouted Topsy and Tim. The keeper brought huge lumps of meat for the lions. It was fun to see them enjoying their food. Topsy and Tim were hungry. Mummy found a slot machine that sold orange drinks and chocolate. Topsy and Tim thought it was a good slot machine. The sea lions were hungry too. The keeper threw them fish from a bucket. "Can we take a sea lion home?" asked Tim. "No," said Topsy. "It might eat our goldfish." Topsy and Tim wanted to take all the monkeys home, but it was time for Mummy and Dad to take Topsy and Tim home. Topsy and Tim were glad they had not brought any zoo animals home. Their own pet animals were just as interesting, and they were good old friends too. "I don't know why we go to the zoo," said Dad. "We've got our own zoo at home."
Topsy and Tim learned to swim. Topsy and Tim were learning to swim. Mummy took them to the swimming pool nearly every day. Mummy helped them to put on their swimming things and blow up their armbands. She put their clothes safely in a locker. On the way to the pool, there were showers to make sure they were nice and clean. There was a small pool for beginners like Topsy and Tim. It was full of noisy children. "Race you to the water," shouted Topsy. Topsy's feet skidded. Mr. Pollock, the swimming instructor, rushed to save her. "Never run near the pool," he said. "The floor is wet and slippery, and it's very hard if you fall and bang your head." Topsy and Tim went down the steps into the pool. Mummy went in with them. The water came up to Topsy and Tim's middles. They held onto the rail and kicked as hard as they could. Mummy did get splashed. "Stretch your legs out," she said. "Now let me see you swim dog paddle," said Mummy. Topsy paddled like a puppy. Her armbands helped her to float. Tim paddled hard. He splashed more than Topsy, but his legs kept sinking. "Do you think you could swim without your armbands?" asked Mummy. "Of course," shouted Tim. "I'm a champion swimmer." First, Topsy stood in the water a few steps from the side. Then she pushed forward in the water and dog paddled to the handrail. "Well done, Topsy," said Mummy. "You can really swim now." Then it was Tim's turn. He tried hard, but his feet would not float. "Never mind," said Mummy. "You must put your armbands back on." "Can I help?" said a kind voice. It was Mr. Pollock, the swimming instructor. He told Tim to bob right down until the water was up to his chin. "Now walk along and pull the water back with your hands," he said. Tim paddled hard with his hands, then he kicked up and down with his legs. "Look at me," he gasped. "I'm swimming." And he really was. Mummy helped them to get dressed and dry their hair. "Won't Dad be surprised when we tell him we can swim without our armbands?" said Tim. Dad was waiting for them in the snack bar. "Dad, we can swim," cried Topsy. Dad was pleased. He pointed to a poster on the wall. "There's going to be a swimming competition," he said. "You can swim in the beginner's race, Topsy and Tim." The next week, Dad and Mummy and Topsy and Tim went to the big pool for the swimming competition. There were short races, there were long races. There was a race for children swimming on their backs. Last of all, there was the beginner's race in the beginner's pool. Mr. Pollock blew his whistle to start the race. Topsy swam dog paddle as fast as she could. Tim was left behind, but he knew what to do. He bobbed right down in the water until it reached his chin. Then he paddled hard with his hands and feet. Everyone cheered as the children swam slowly across the pool. Topsy and Tim didn't win the race, but everyone got a beginner's badge because they had all reached the other side.
Should we find out what happens when Topsy and Tim go camping? Topsy and Tim were going camping with Mummy and Dad. They were taking 2 tents, a big one for Mummy and Dad and a small one for Topsy and Tim. It was a long drive, but at last they arrived at the campsite. It was in a field beside a little wood. Topsy and Tim helped to unload the car. Putting the tents up was a puzzle at first, but Topsy and Tim soon remembered how to do it. "I like our tent best," said Topsy. Tim went to fetch water. He was surprised to find a tap in the field. It was a very splashy tap. There was hot soup for supper and sandwiches and big red apples. After supper, Topsy and Tim went with Mummy and Dad to explore the wood. "Somebody's been painting arrows on the trees," said Tim. "Look." "Yes," said Mummy. "If we follow those arrows, they will take us for a good walk and bring us back to camp." When they got back to their camp, they saw that another family had arrived in the field. 2 big boys and their mom and dad. They were unloading their car and putting up their tent. The big boys were very noisy. "Let's go and play inside our tent," said Topsy to Tim. "It's time you 2 got into your sleeping bags," said Mummy. Topsy and Tim were almost asleep in their cozy sleeping bags when something hit their tent with a wallop. It gave them a fright. The naughty boys had kicked a football hard at Topsy and Tim's tent. "Sorry," called the boys. Next morning, Topsy and Tim were up bright and early, and so were the big boys. "We're going to play in the wood," said the big boys. "We'll come too," said Topsy and Tim. They had a wonderful time in the wood. They swung from trees like monkeys. "I'm the king of the jungle," shouted Tim. They chased after rabbits, trying to catch them, but the rabbits ran faster. "I nearly caught one," puffed Topsy, but it ran down a rabbit hole. At last they began to feel hungry. None of them had had breakfast. They wanted to go back to the camp, but they did not know which way to go. "We're lost," said one of the big boys. "No, we're not," said Topsy. "The arrows in the trees will lead us back to camp. Mummy said so." Mummy and Dad were glad to see them. "I was just coming to find you," said Dad. "What have you been up to?" "We've had adventures," said Tim. Topsy and Tim were ready for breakfast, but Mommy could not get the camp stove to work. "We'll have to make do with a cold breakfast," she said. The big boy's dad came to see what was wrong. "Come and join us," he said. "There's plenty of room on the barbecue." Yes, love barbecue. Soon there was the lovely smell of sausages and bacon cooking on the big boy's barbecue, and there was plenty for everyone. "I love camping," said Tim. "I wish we could stay here forever," said Topsy.
Topsy and Tim help a friend. One morning, Topsy and Tim met Stevie Dunton at the school gate. Stevie looked upset. "What's wrong, Stevie?" asked Tim. "I hate school," said Stevie. Stevie cheered up when they went into the classroom. But at break, he didn't want to go out to play. "What's wrong, Stevie?" asked Miss Terry. "Nothing," said Stevie, and he went outside. Topsy and Tim were playing It in the playground with their friends. Kerry was It. Stevie joined in and Kerry began to chase him. Stevie was a good runner. He was getting away from Kerry when James, the biggest boy in the class, stuck out his foot and tripped Stevie up. Stevie began to cry. Cry baby, shouted James and his friend Sylvie. Some of the children laughed. Topsy and Tim didn't, but they didn't know what to do. After break, it was PE. The children had to change into their plimsolls. Soon, everyone was ready, except Stevie. Come on, Stevie, we're waiting for you, said Miss Terry. I can't find one of my plimsolls, said Stevie. There it is, said Topsy, pointing to Stevie's peg. How did it get there, said Stevie. Tim saw Sylvie wink at James. After school, Topsy and Tim told Mummy about James and Sylvie. James keeps on being mean to Stevie, said Topsy, and Sylvie copies him, said Tim. I think Sylvie and James are being bullies, said Mummy. What's a bully? Asked Topsy. It's someone who likes to hurt or frighten other people, said Mummy. They make everyone afraid to tell a grown-up. It was very brave of you to tell me, and you should tell Miss Terry too. But that's telling tales, said Topsy. That's what bullies think, said Mummy. That's how they get away with hurting other people. When Stevie was hanging up his coat the next day at school, James ran in. He grabbed Stevie's school bag and threw it across the room. Catch, Sylvie, he shouted. That's not yours, shouted Topsy. Give it back to Stevie, yelled Tim. Sylvie grabbed the bag and threw it back to James. James dropped the bag on the floor and everything fell out. Everyone laughed, except Topsy and Tim and Stevie. What's going on in here? Asked Miss Terry. James did it, said Topsy. He's always doing nasty things to Stevie. He's a bully, said Tim. All right, children. Calm down, said Miss Terry. I think it's time we had a class chat. When all the children were settled, Miss Terry talked to them about bullying. Then she asked them to tell her what bullies did. They hit and they hurt you, said Andy Anderson. They call you names, said Rye. They make your friends be nasty to you, said Louise. They think it's funny and they don't always know they're hurting your feelings, said Alice. Why are bullies so unkind, said Topsy. Sometimes bullies have been bullied themselves, said Miss Terry. Then they take it out on someone else because it makes them feel big. Topsy and Tim began to feel sorry for the bullies. I hate bullying, said Kerry. Does anyone here like bullying? Asked Miss Terry. No, shouted all the children. At lunch, Miss Terry, James, Sylvie and Stevie Dunton sat down to have a chat. I'm sorry I've been mean to you, said James, looking upset. Me too, said Sylvie. We don't want to be bullies. Thank you for saying sorry, said Stevie. You did upset me, but let's be friends instead. Everyone played it together. Soon, it was time to go back into the classroom. You look like you've been playing nicely, said Miss Terry. We've had lots of fun, said Tim. After school, Topsy and Tim and Stevie ran to the school gates to meet their mums. Was school all right today? Asked Stevie's mum. Yes, it was, said Stevie. I've got something to tell you. Stevie told his mum that James and Sylvie had been bullying him. Oh dear, said Stevie's mum, looking upset. Don't worry, Mum, said Stevie. Topsy and Tim told Miss Terry about it and she talked to the whole class. I feel much better because James and Sylvie said they were sorry too. Stevie's mum gave him a big hug. Goodbye, Stevie, said Topsy and Tim. See you tomorrow. Stevie smiled and waved at them. See you tomorrow, he called. I can't wait for school now.
Topsy and Tim at the farm. Topsy and Tim and their mummy were on their way to Rosemary Farm. They were going to see Mummy's friend, Mrs. Stewart, the farmer's wife. May we help on the farm? Asked Topsy. Mrs. Stewart gave them 2 egg boxes. Go along to the hen house, she said, and choose 12 nice eggs from the hen's nests to take home. Some hens came to greet Topsy and Tim, and a duck quacked cheerfully. Topsy found some ducklings learning to swim in a little pond. A loud hissing noise startled Topsy and Tim. 4 big, angry-looking geese were moving towards them. We'd better run into the hen house, said Tim. The hen house felt safe, but it was very gloomy. Soon their eyes grew used to the dark and they could see plenty of eggs in the hen's nests. Topsy chose 6 big eggs to fill her box. 4 were white and 2 were brown. The angry geese were on the path back to the farmhouse, so Topsy and Tim could not go that way. They climbed the wall instead, being very careful with their eggs. "Let's go back to the farmhouse this way," said Tim. Topsy and Tim were in the cow's meadow. They did not know which way to turn. Then they saw Farmer Stuart. "I'm about to take these cows to the milking shed," said Farmer Stuart. "Will you give me a hand?" Topsy and Tim helped Farmer Stuart take the cows to the milking sheds, although the cows knew the way themselves. "Can we help milk the cows?" asked Topsy and Tim. "We will soon do that with our machines, thank you," said Farmer Stuart. "I've got a special job for you, though, if you'd care to help." Farmer Stuart took a bucket of new milk. He led Topsy and Tim to a smaller shed. There was a baby calf in the shed. "Poor thing, it wants this milk," said Farmer Stuart, "but it can't drink. It only knows how to suck. Put your eggs down somewhere and then you can teach the calf how to drink from the bucket." Farmer Stuart showed Topsy what to do. She dipped her finger in the milk, then she let the calf suck her milky finger. The calf sucked so hard that Topsy felt nervous. "Don't worry, it won't bite," said Farmer Stuart. Next, Topsy put her hand into the bucket. The calf went on sucking Topsy's finger until her hand and its nose were both in the warm milk. Then it was Tim's turn to feed the calf. The calf soon discovered how to drink from the bucket without any help. Topsy and Tim ran back to the farmhouse to tell Mummy all about it. It was time for Topsy and Tim to go home. As they walked down the lane, they heard a tractor behind them. It was Farmer Stuart. "Here are the eggs you forgot," he said, "and here is a big carton of cream for your tea because you were so good and helpful at the farm." Make sure you join us again soon for more adventures with Topsy and Tim. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon for more story time.
Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you guys again soon.
Bye!
Bye-bye.
Bye!
If you loved Topsy and Tim, why not subscribe to the Toddler Fun Learning and Ladybird channels for lots more amazing videos?